So the other day, I came across a post on Reddit. And I know what some of you are going to say, oh, Reddit. But no, it was the Warhammer competitive subreddit. And I'm going to bring it on screen now so you guys can see it. And it said, the problem with melee armies in 10th edition. And I noticed that this actually had quite a lot of upvotes and a lot of comments. And I read through it, and I thought there was some good complaints here. But I also thought it was remarkable that we were getting people complaining about melee armies in an edition which I personally feel has never been more favorable to running a melee army. So I have a little bit of beef with this, although I do think there are some very good points made in here, and we will go, obviously we'll be very fair-minded. I know we'll have a little bit of memes, but we're going to be actually pretty fair-minded with this. But I want to go through this and then basically point out what I agree with, what I don't agree with, and then I also want to point out why I think 10th edition has been one of the most melee-friendly editions. And this is my hot take. Okay, it's my hot take. So let's go through it, because I do think this is actually quite interesting, and I actually think it's better than the typical low-hanging GW beef slop that we've had. This might actually, I don't know if you can even class it as beef. This might actually be discussion. And the moment I saw this, I knew I had to talk about it. And the reason I had to talk about it is because we just don't have enough discussion these days in 10th edition. The 10th edition has been, as I've said, a very solved edition. There's been some very obvious answers. There's been some very like, oh, you don't take that, take this instead, blah, blah, blah. And it's actually nice to see a post like this. Even if I don't agree with it wholeheartedly, I actually like to, see this kind of stuff because it gets the fucking discussion going. Because personally, I feel like this is something that doesn't happen enough these days. There's too many yes and no's. There's not enough maybes. This is an alternative option. This is an alternative opinion. So I do really like to see this, and this is why I wanted to bring it up, because it's been a goodly while since I felt like I've seen a proper good discussion post with Warhammer 40k. So let's get into it. So the problem with melee armies in 10th edition. There's been a lot of talk about Catan warping the meta, and basically every content creator has been unhappy with this recent balance patch. Agreed. I've been very unhappy with it. I've been very unhappy with it because it's boring. The main reason often being that Catan weren't hit hard enough. Yep. I want to talk a little bit about how balance spreads across this game and helps build our meta. I love that, because we hear this term thrown around all the time. Meta this, meta that, meta I barely even know. Ha 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 ha. Right? But the point is, I actually really like this because it's someone who's taking the time not to just go, meh, Catan didn't go up enough. Meh, Catan dominating. Meh. It's like, okay, this is the problem, but let's dig a little bit deeper. And you guys know I love it when I get the opportunity to dig a bit deeper. Like when people go, the D6 system is the problem. No, it's not. If the D6 system was the problem, how come every other game like Bolt Action and Old World and Conflict and all that kind of stuff is totally fine with the D6 system? Again, I've gone on about this, and I still want to do a stream highlight about this, but the D6 system isn't the problem. It's fixed to hit values and stuff like that, which is the problem. But anyway, let's get into it. But scratching below the surface, not just looking at the symptom, but going further and looking at potentially more game design problems, which are actually what need to be solved. So primarily, melee armies make up about 1/3 of the armies in 40k. Combined arms using an even-ish mix of the melee and range units makes about 1/3, and primarily ranged armies make up about another third. I'm not going to quibble completely over the fractions there. I will say that I think it really depends on what terrain you're playing on. If you're playing on GW terrain, there's maybe this is more likely to be true. as someone in the UK who basically exclusively plays on UKTC and WTC boards, which are incredibly dense, I find that 2/3 of armies I would class as melee armies that I encounter, because the terrain is so dense that they really just don't, they're just not conducive to running mass shooting. The only time you ever get to run mass shooting is if your faction is kind of hard locked to it, a bit like with Tau, and to a lesser extent Guard, although Guard is a bit more flexible. But maybe we're talking here less what you see on the tabletop, and maybe we're talking here more the factions themselves that exist, not the factions that are played, but the factions that exist. But anyway, let's get into it. So for melee armies, we occasionally see rules that push them out of the meta and the game as a whole. That's a very interesting point. For me, it's... I would counter this a little bit, and I think he's going to address this, but I don't think it's that melee armies... Okay, this is my take. It's not that melee armies get pushed out. It's that something comes along which is a better melee army, which then basically puts all the other close combat only factions in the shitter, because they don't have enough tools to answer the situation. It's what we've talked about with the game becoming more rock, paper, scissors. It's what we've talked about with factions becoming too thin. It's what we've talked about with some of the core problems with Newhammer and their gimmicky faction design, and what often feels like core design problems. Again, I think this in many ways relates to the fixed to hit system. You have armies which, if you had things like weapon skill versus weapon skill, if you had more variances than just a 3+ to hit or a 4+ to hit, you would be less likely to get these extremes of problems, because you've got more than just, I'm on a 3+, oh, I'm also on a 3+, but my 3+ is better than your 3+. You have more differentials there. But anyway, we'll see what he says. Let's go back to early 10th edition. Adeptus Custodes had a character with the option to fights first, and had a stratagem to fights first. For the melee armies, they could charge in and be fought first and die, or sit around not charging and then die. So they had to hit multiple places to win, except the Custodes player would then just fights first and kill a unit, get hit, then interrupt in a second location and kill a second unit. The power of Custodes in melee basically squeezed all of the melee factions out of the game for a time. They had no game into that set of rules. The ability to fight first anywhere broke the game for 1/3 of the meta. This has been patched out of the game. So this is exactly what I was talking about. This is exactly what I was talking about. Custodes, how can you say... Well, I suppose it's not... Yes, this is a perfect example of what the title is saying. The problem with melee armies of 10th edition. This title is not saying that melee armies are unplayable. They're saying that, like, that I actually misread it and misunderstood it. So lambast me, beef me. But what it's saying is, like, it's not that melee armies don't get to play in the game. It's that throughout the entire edition, melee focused armies have had these gatekeeper moments. And I think this is true to a certain extent of melee armies, but I think it's true to an extent for a lot of every army at some point. Like, Catan aren't just a problem for melee armies. But anyway, I think a big part of this is what I was saying. Like, it's not that melee armies were unplayable. It's that Custodes were just the best melee army. They were just the best close quarters force. They were just the best at fighting hand to hand. So the moment that one faction just becomes the best at this, and other factions don't have enough tools in their toolbox to be able to counter it, the game starts falling apart. Like with World Eaters, for example, World Eaters are so monodirectional these days. It's just melee. There's not, oh, I need to take a bit of shooting to clear the way to then send my melee in. They're just so one-directional. I think they're more mono build now than they ever have been. And I think a big part of that is because I think, people do skew too much. I will say, I think there is definitely a player problem here with people, like what we saw with the Aquilans. The Aquilans with the IQ stat check, where if you're a World Eater player and you haven't brought enough shooting to clear out 10 guardsman bodies, then there's an element, and that's stopping you from like doing your charges. Then frankly, there's an element of that being on you. Like you should, I played against Orcs recently, and the Orc player was 75% close combat, and he brought 25% of his list in 2 big squads of flash kits. And the flash kits were completely sacrificial. The idea was you just use those first early on to clear the screens, and then when the screens were clear enough, that's when the melee wave started coming out. Yeah. So I do think there's an element of that, but I also think that there's an element of factions have been really limited in the amount of tools they have. Really, really limited. And it can, especially from like a points perspective, yes, it's all well and good saying you should take a bit of shooting to clear the screens. But if you have shooting which is just too expensive or not efficient enough for doing the job, then the problem you find is that you might only want to spend 25% of your points on shooting, but you might end up having to spend 40% of your points on shooting, and then you don't have enough left over to deliver a sufficient close combat punch. So there is a fine, but I can see it from both sides. There's a fine balance. I think there's an element of blame here for points and faction design for GW. I think there's an element of player mentality needing to shift. I think there's a bit of grain of truth in both camps there. Not to fence it, but I think that's my genuine opinion. Now, what I will say, this is a great example of, though. For me, this guy has identified a problem in the game, but hasn't dug deep enough to really find what the cause of the problem was. Because the cause of the problem wasn't even Custodes. The cause of the problem was fights first. Fights first, and everything GW has done to try and work out who actually goes first in a combat is completely and utterly unnecessary. This is an example, if I may, vindication, send me to the black ships. This is an example of why we need initiative back in the game. And this is an example of, and I've said this, and some people love it when I say this. Some people think I'm being a bit arrogant when I say this, but if you can't work out that the bigger number goes first, you've got bigger problems than playing war games. Like, just have an initiative-based system. Just be like, okay, the Custodes are initiative 6, my guys are initiative 5. So the Custodes are going to go first. Now, you might be like, but Mordian, that's going to, like, really fucking, that's going to mean like Custodes always fight first. That's going to be a huge problem, never going to get a look in. You have to combine this with things like weapon skill versus weapon skill. This then allows us, you have to combine this with things like removing rerolls. You have to combine this with things like bringing the number of attacks down. You have to combine this with being able to fuck someone's initiative up. Like, if you just willy-nilly charge the Custodes, then they're going to fight first, and sure. But what if you have the ability to, what if you have a bit, I don't know, like a universal special, like pinning, where when the enemy, which used to exist, when the enemy is pinned, they then strike at initiative 1 in close combat if they're then charged. Because you might be like, oh, well, how would you ever pin a Custodes down? I don't know, man. Custodes are really good, but if Custodes get hit by a massive artillery barrage, there's just as likely as anyone else to like get down to avoid the artillery shells. Like Space Marines are as well. All right. Or you can have people who charge get an initiative bonus. So it's like, okay, like an old world where if I charge, I basically get like a +3 initiative bonus. Sometimes this will, most of the time, this will be enough for me to strikes first. But in some cases, it won't be. But in the cases where it's not enough for me to strike first, there's a very good reason for it, aka elves, where elves are so fragile that if they get hit first, they just crumple. So they need to strike first to do a bit of damage to you as basically more of a defensive measure because it stops as many attacks coming in. But the point is, like, we need an initiative system. There needs to be ways to interact with that initiative system to lower and increase initiative so that players can be rewarded for setting up charges effectively. Like if you're a World Eater player and you just spam Berserkers, then that's great, but you might fly into some Custodians and just laminate yourself. But if you then bring, let's say, a Forge Fiend, and you give the Forge Fiend the Gatling guns, and maybe the Gatling guns have an ability where they, you can have pinning and then a number in brackets. The number in brackets represents how much it lowers the enemy's initiative if they are pinned by this weapon. Maybe you stack that, maybe you don't. We'll have to, that's a debate for more than just this quick hypothesis. But you can be like, okay, I'm going to shoot my Forge Fiend first. That's going to apply, like, let's say, a pinning 2 to the Custodian. So now they're -2 initiative. And if I charge, I get like +3 to my initiative. So, oh, look, now my Berserkers get to strike first. And I've actually, done the bare minimum to, like, set this up. Rather than just, oh, I charge, so I go first. Like, that's bollocks. Yeah. Like, we need... And true. And while we're at it, we should acknowledge that there isn't a skill, say, with a weapon that could influence how easy to hit. Exactly. Like, the problem you have is Custodians in this example is that Custodians not only were fighting first, but they were also hitting on 2s with sustained hits and rerolls and all this kind of stuff. But if you just had, like, the Custodian, even if you had the Custodians fighting first, but when a Custodians fights a Berserker, they hit the Custodians hit on 3s, no rerolls, suddenly they don't become anywhere near as threatening. Like, they're still really good, but the Berserkers aren't just going to get blended before they get a chance. Yeah. So this is just a great example of why we need things like weapon skill back. We need things like pinning back. We need things like initiative back. We need things like, being in a defensive position, being able to counter defensive positions, all this kind of stuff. It's just all this really does. It doesn't necessarily highlight the problem with melee armies. Melee armies and the woes they have are the symptom. The real... And so this is why you'll see there's like more and more examples here. They fix one symptom, but they can never fix the game. They can fix one symptom, but they can never fix the problem. The problem will pop up again in another area. And the reason why is because the symptom goes, it's not the problem. The problem, the cause of the rot of the disease is in the core game design. Yeah. That rat bastard. Nah, man. It should be equally easy to hit a Gretchen as hit a Scion of the God of Fighting. I know. It's so unimmersive, and the moment the problem I have with a lot of modern 40k, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent here, but the problem I have with it is, if you ever think about it for longer than a second, there's a lot of stuff in the game that just doesn't make sense. And I'm not talking like, oh, I want it to be more realistic. I'm talking from a game mechanic point of view. Moving on. Modern day with Catan, if you shoot them enough with big guns, you can get there usually. But what of our poor Black Templars and Blood Angel players? What of the third of the game with little to no shooting? Do you think a Sword Brethren's 3 attacks at strength 5, damage 2 is going to get there? What about Sanguinary Guard and their 4 attacks of damage 2? They can pick strength 6 and land 3 on 4s. Spoiler alert, neither unit does essentially any damage into a Catan. It's an... If I may get my soapbox again for a moment, I absolutely agree with what is actually being said here. But again, this is a symptom. Moving over to the damage system at the time looked like a really good idea. But if you were to take these stats and go back to 8th edition, we're not even talking that long ago. We're literally talking like just Newhammer, just a couple of editions ago. These stats are bananas. These stats are massively inflated. We're getting to the point where people are like, oh, my 4 attacks are hitting on 2s at strength 6 with +1 to wound at damage 2 isn't enough damage. The problem with the damage system is quite simple. It just leads to stat bloat and attack bloat, and it looks like whenever GW pumps the numbers up on something, it looks like it's fixed a problem, but all it is doing is window dressing. How can we have a game where it's hyper lethal, yet at the same time, it's hyper lethal? The amount of dice being rolled, the amount of reliability in those rolls, the amount of damage that is being spaffed out. How can we have such incredible damage inflation? Lethality that's never been higher. Lethality rivaling 10 Riptides worth of firepower in 7th edition. And yet people say that's not enough damage. We've got stat bloat. Massive, massive stat bloat. That's the problem. To get around, so run 3 melee is a damage through a higher, right? To get around the -1 damage from Catan. Well, Blood Angel and Black Templars both have roughly 20 plus characters each to choose from. And yet of those 40 plus options, there's only one character with damage 3 plus. And spoiler alert, he doesn't contribute nearly enough points to even chip a Catan, let alone actually threaten to kill one. So you've got, you know, it wasn't that long ago. In 8th edition, having a damage 2 weapon was significant. In 9th edition, having a damage 3 weapon is significant. We're getting to the point now where people are saying like damage 2 is the bare minimum. We need damage 3 everywhere. Again, the issue, how come a Hive Tyrant in Oldhammer with, when I say Oldhammer, I mean like sort of 3rd to sort of 7th edition, right? Midhammer would probably be a better way of saying it. How come a Hive Tyrant in Midhammer, which has only got 6 wounds, feels tougher than a Hive Tyrant with double the wounds, a better invulnerable save, a better armor save? This damage system is not working. It's not working. Not even slightly. And it's, you can't, like the numbers keep going up. You're absolutely right, Ryan. They're totally different games at this point. You're absolutely right. That in many, Ryan, you've actually proved my point. They are totally different games at this point. But that doesn't mean that there isn't important lessons to be drawn from that. What, you know, the different mechanics and how they work and how they produce different results. Yeah. The numbers have never been higher, yet the same problems have occurred in 8th, 9th, and 10th edition. We've tried these systems for 10 years. They clearly don't work. Ryan, come to our house, the grass is greener. Bro, I used to love Heresy, But you guys have inherited half the... You guys are in the beginning of your problem journey. Let me tell you, the moment you guys moved over to the damage system, that the game's cooked. You might not see it now. You might not agree with me now. Trust me, if you ever get a 4th edition, you'll see. Yeah. Trust me, I've played these games before. So the problem is, like, the numbers have never been higher, yet the same problems keep occurring. If the same problems keep occurring, yet the numbers have been higher, that is because it means you're treating symptoms. You're not treating the problem. The problem is core game design. Catan are a big problem, don't get me wrong. But Catan are just the pinnacle of what has gone wrong. I run multiple events on Black Templars and Blood Angels, including GTs. You have no game, no shot, no chance into Catan if you're on these factions. And they're everywhere. Rock, paper, scissors. Gentlemen, you know the line. Vindication! Send me to the black ships. Send me to the black ships. Once again, did I not call this? Did I not call this exact thing last year and beginning of this year as well? You're absolutely right, Siriade. Rock, paper, scissors is terrible for game design. Rock, paper, scissors is a design choice, but rock, paper, scissors is terrible for game design if you've got a faction which only has rock and it plays into a faction which has rock, paper, and scissors, because the faction that they play into could just go, oh, paper every time. I did warn you all. I warned you all. I said all of this was happening.
When it comes to fighting crime, there's only one man keeping the streets safe.
You know, I know, you know. You know what? I'm not going to wank myself off. I'm not going to wank myself off.
Indeed.
I'm just going to say I called it. And the thing is, not only did I call it, I've been calling it for a little while now. So you can't have, so anyone who wants to come out and go, well, it's obvious these are the problems, Morty, blah, 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 blah. You're just jumping on the bandwagon. Bro, I was so early, I was so early to this, I'm driving the fucking bandwagon. You know? Yeah. The same sort of thing keeps happening. The squeezing out of entire sections of the game. You don't nerf Catan because they're unbeatable for everyone. You nerf them because some armies don't have the tools to even hazard a chance at a game into them. And it's fucking miserable. Nothing is less enjoyable in a game than looking down and just being like, I have no chance. Now let me be clear. There are things like this that can happen in every game. Like, hell, I've looked down at some old world boards and gone, I'm cooked. Yeah, I'm in trouble. I've looked down at some Conflict 47 boards and bought action boards and gone, well, yeah, I'm cooked. But what's funny is for every story I have of looking down at an old world board or a K47 board or a bot action board and going, I'm cooked. I have a story of a time when I thought I was cooked, but then maybe through a bit of luck of the dice, maybe through a bit of just locking the fuck in, and maybe through a little bit of just pure determination, I managed to win a game I had no right of winning. Or I thought I had no right of winning. Great example of this, so you know I'm not just talking hypotheticals, when I managed to beat Cathay in Old World. I managed to beat unnerfed Cathay with a very unmeta Renegade Crowns army. And it just came down to my opponent failed a couple of key spells. I made a couple of long charges. And my opponent was a little overconfident. And I didn't just throw the game because I assumed I was going to lose it. I locked the fuck in, had a game plan, and executed it. Like, that is a game that if you put those two lists against each other and asked any asked Rob, the honest wargamer, you know, to say who do you think is going to win, he would say Cathay 9 times out of 10. Yeah. There's always times when you might just get, and that story will stay with me forever. Because it was epic. Absolutely bloody epic. The problem with 40k is that the problem with 40k is not only do you have those moments where you look down and go, this is a matchup I can't win, but then you've got the damage output and the reliability of the dice is just so high that you can't even trust to the dice saving you. Like, your opponent you and your opponent basically achieve the expected outcome every single time. There's very little unreliability in the game. Very. So the problem is not just rock, paper, scissors, because that can exist in every game. The problem is then rock, paper, scissors combined with being on a fixed to hit value, which then introduces mechanics like having too many rerolls to show the difference between if I hit a 2+ and I hit a 2+, well, how do I show that my guy's better? My guy gets rerolls. It's the problem with the damage system. It's the problem with all of this kind of stuff. It's the problem with basically you've got rock, paper, scissors, and then the game design favors reliability too much. It's too easy to get reliability. And that means the only chance you ever have of beating someone is if they are a fucking moron. And it is a great compliment to the wargaming community that I have yet to play. I have very rarely been able to win a game because my opponent was just a fucking idiot. Maybe once or twice in like 15 years of playing competitively. Basically doesn't happen. Most people are pretty switched on enough and they make pretty decent decisions. And even if they don't make the best decision every time, we're not talking about someone making a couple of mistakes. We're talking about someone being like actually pants on head, full send remedial. That's the only time when, and it very, 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 very rarely happens. Especially in 10th edition with how competitive it is. Yeah. Warhammer, oh, here we go. I'm about to fucking get super hard. I'm about to go to 6 to midnight. Warhammer should not be a rock, paper, scissors game where if you hit a bad matchup, you auto lose. Preach it, brother. Preach it, brother. Yeah. And again, look, you guys may not have believed, I know I say this a lot, but when I say stuff, people often don't believe me. And I think it's because I'm basically like a slapstick actor on stream, you know, like, you know? So I understand why a lot of people don't take me seriously on certain aspects and why a lot of people will go, oh, this Mordian guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But yeah, I know I don't believe in Math Hammer. I know I talk a lot of shit, but if I may, I have been playing war games for 28 years. There's never been a time in my life where I haven't been wargaming. So sometimes, on the rare occasion, I might have a small inkling about what I'm talking about. Armies should be able to be well-rounded and have tools to play into the field. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. The splitting off, breaking off of factions, breaking off. No, man. Like, everything should just be, like, all... I know people don't want to hear this, but everything for Chaos should be in one codex. And it's... And not only is breaking off of factions bad, this is a result of the dreaded policy. Armies used to have so many more options to draw upon. So many hidden units and niche little things that they could improvise, adapt, and overcome with. Now it's a fucking bare dust bowl of unit selection for so many factions. The best general should win off the back of his skill and gamesmanship. Catan break that for 1/3 of the game minimum. And for that reason, they needed to be changed. Yeah. Look, there's always... I agree with the sentiment of the best general should win off the back of his skill and gamesmanship. I agree with that, but I'm also a realist, and I fully accept that there will be some factions which are better than others at any one point. I like inherently, maybe they get slightly better army rules, maybe they just get slightly better units, whatever it might be. I accept inherently that there will be some factions which are better than others, and I've always been okay with that. I've bitched and moaned and whined as much as the next Wargamer over many different editions about, oh, well, that's a broken OP. But fundamentally, it's never stopped me from enjoying my dudes and being able to, like, play my guys. And even though there's sometimes been, games that I've, like, gone into a game and I've just been, like, smashed, typically it's because I've been smashed because of my own fault. Like, and that might be even in the army building section. If I build, like, pure infantry, and I go, as I love to do, run my pure infantry, and then I just play into a faction which just has the tools to deal with that, then that's on me. I built a skew, it's got an Achilles heel, and then I died. That's fine. That's me losing on my terms. That's me losing because of my decisions. That's me losing because I chose to go themed or skewed in a certain direction. That's not me losing because I brought a proper army and then I just got butt fucked because someone else just smashed the Catan button. Yeah. Yeah. I fully accept that there should be certain, that it should, skill and gamesmanship should be a huge part of it. But there's also an element of realism. But I do agree with the sentiment. We need to study up and learn about these rules interactions that break factions, and we need to think of proactive ways they can buff armies to compete across the board or get around rules that sink them, or learn to avoid printing rules that take entire factions out of the meta. Sounds like we need a community patch. Sounds like GW should be focused on the rules and on the core rules and the models, and the community needs to take back a bit of ownership here. Well. Some renegades, if you will. Rather than a fuck you GW game, what we need is a fuck you GW edition. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm talking about. Looks like community sentiment is turning. I told you guys. This balanced data slate was so damaging. It was so much more damaging than people thought about on the surface. A lot of people just complained about the symptoms of the problem. I know I keep saying this shit, but they did. Now we're getting down into the weeds. We're getting down into the dirt. We're getting down, scratching below the surface. The damage that the last two balanced data slates have done cannot be calculated or quantified on a spreadsheet. They're intangible. They're vibes. But those vibes are very important. And people will turn like that as a whole. Like mob mentality as a whole will turn. And you see it I see it in real life. I see it I live on the internet, but I obviously play a lot of games in person, and I see it everywhere. You can, that's a lie. You can, in fact, right. They fucked it on a spreadsheet. I'll be honest. I've said it once. I've said it 1,000 times. There is a lot riding on 11th edition. The moment, send me to the black ships, because you guys can, I've got the receipts, go find the streams where I talked about this, go and find the videos where I talked about this. Guys, what was the reaction that I had when the first rumors came out that 11th was going to be 10.5? I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. What do you think the reaction is going to be if we go into 11th edition and Catan spam is still fucked? What do you think is going to happen when all those new people pick up the game, get their first 2K, or they pick up a couple of halves of the Orc side of the box set, a couple of halves of the Space Marine side of the box set, and they're like, play a few games, and they go down to their local club, and they get paired into, oh, cool, I've not played against Necrons before, and someone just mows through them with Catan spam. And then someone mows through them with Ultramarine spam. And they're like, what the fuck? '11th edition, and now again, let me reiterate, I'm not saying it's fucked. I'm saying it needs to, just cruising from 10th into 11th is not an option. And I fully believe that 11th edition has the potential to fix everything discussed here. I fully, truly believe it. And if the leaks and releases come out and everything gets fixed, or enough gets fixed to, enough gets fixed, not even everything, enough gets fixed to stop, to make these problems go away, even for a time, I'll be happy. Great. And myself and everyone will be happy. Yeah, it'll be awesome. But it can't just be 10th and, we made, like, 11th edition can't just be 10th and we've made ruins so anyone can move through them. Because that's the rumor on terrain, by the way. Same terrain rules, just anyone can move through ruins now. Like, vehicles can drive through them and stuff. If that's all it is, it needs to do more. I'm praying, I'm hoping it will do more. Yeah. Now let's look at some of the comments here. Not a very experienced player. Hey, you know what? That's actually more valid than anything, man, because you're a new player looking in. That's very important. but my love for Creators of Bow plummeted after my magical hit stratagem was getting rolled over by reroll attacks. Sometimes I think more army should have Armor of Contempt, or maybe it should be a default army-wide stratagem. It's funny. They say history doesn't repeat, but it does. That is exactly what we had in 9th edition. Halfway through 9th edition, Space Marines were getting bodied so hard, GW introduced Armor of Contempt as an army-wide rule for anyone in power armor. And it fixed the problems. Oh boy, did it fix the problems. Created some new ones, but it fixed. Marines stopped dying so easily. In my example, the single defense stratagem available is rendered obsolete depending on the opposing army's rule. Maybe an answer could be more thoughtful stratagem dispersion. Stratagems aren't going to fix this. Stratagems are a cause of the problem. They're not going to fix it. This is just a power creep problem. The answer is not to buff defensive abilities, though. Rerolls need to be taken down, and not in the incredibly selective fashion we saw at the start of 10th edition. At a start, full hit and wound rerolls need to disappear outside of command rerolls. It's absurd that the game based on movement statistics has a way to so easily get around those statistics. Rerolls allow many units to be too efficient into too many things. It's bad for the health of the game. Totally agree. But rerolls, again, are a symptom because of it's rerolls combined with fixed hit values, which is the problem. Yeah. What have we got next comment? This is all just the same thing. I disagree that the issue is related to this. I think the stat checking of Catan is just too much. Like, even when it's balanced, the play patterns are awful. They invalidate too wide a span of weapons at T12, 4++. Yep, totally agree. Invulnerable saves are such a lazy way of representing, like, oh, I just don't die. Yeah, just 4+. Oh, stopped it. And even then, the weapons that are good enough to get there essentially cannot benefit from AP. So all damage is 50-50 right off the bat. Damage is reduced, which maximum damage is functionally is the same as damage halving for that. If only there was a system where, like, you know, if I have an AP 3 weapon and you've got a 3+ armor save, that you don't get a save, but cover gave you a certain kind of save. Like, if I'm in a forest, it gave me a 5+ cover save. If only that existed. Then about 1/3 of that damage is disrupted by feel no pain. Then if you don't kill them on turn, they heal. The issue there isn't ranged or melee units. It's just the single most stat checking army in the game, and increased stat checking just makes for worse game patterns. Catan are just the hardest stat checking in the game, and they are awful to play against because of it. Harder than Knights Exploders, Death Shot Terminators, Death Through Terminators, actually probably the same league as the Lion L. Johnson, but there's a difference between an army with 1 Lion and 5. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. GW has done this all edition. They're basically just a great point, but again, a little missing the wood for the trees. GW has done this all edition. They're basically just making armies that counter other combat armies. Rock, paper. Yeah. It's a paradigm that started with Custodians, continued on with, I would say, 6% of combat armies having some form of fight on death. Maybe 30% of a fights first. Combat already soft counters combat with heroic intervention interrupt. Look at the Lion, Wrath of the Rock lists with ICCs and Judicars. Yes, Catan completely break damage to armies, and when damage to armies get broken, that allows armies to run light on screens and bring more guns, which helps the Catan match up certain armies that can bring the guns to kill 1 per turn. I look at event-winning Ultramarine lists nowadays, and they're bringing 1 scout, I mean 1 incurse, so like 12 total activations, and literally 0 screens. Makes me so sad. It's so bad that. And about the health population of Orcs, Blood Angels, and Warriors, that won't fly. Honestly, half the damn reason Ultramarines are so good right now is because of Catan keeping threat saturation wireless totally at the table. In a roundabout way, Catan makes boosts Oath the moment faster than it should be. That's an interesting point. Yeah. Catan having that knock-on effect. OGW learns to completely shift away from durability skews. They are the antithesis of competitive balance and by far the worst Mets edition. We just saw this with Knights this past summer. Too many powerful high defensive models force players to use unbalanced lists and use some armies into the shelf until emergency patch. Even worse, the better player was not winning the match consistently. Anyone can whip out Necrons and go 3-2 while pushing 3 Catan forward, sipping whiskey and eating crayons. At least the Elder Overlord had some skill to win. I love that. Durability is fine. This is the thing. Oops, sorry. Durability is fine. You need to just be slow or low damage. Yeah, this is the thing. Death Guard, used to be really, really durable, but just not do that much damage. I'm talking 6th and 7th edition. And then now Death Guard are really lethal and really tough. But even then, they're still kind of slow. Yeah. Whiskey and Grass, sign me up. Yeah. It's just the fact of the matter is, people say 10th edition has been the most balanced edition of 40k, but it's not true. But this guy's talked about going back 9 months, back to summer of 2025, and now this thing was dominating the meta. You can go back through every 3 months of 10th edition, and there's been one faction or another, or several factions, which have just been like bodying the entire game. But somehow it's the most balanced edition. It's not the most balanced edition. It's just that things that have been broken have been toned down, but they've never actually got the balance right. Now, it's actually still very worthy of recognizing that things that were causing problems in the game were toned down. And one of the reasons why Catan have fucked people off so much is because they haven't been toned down. So it's worthy of recognizing, like, two things can be right at the same time. This hasn't been the most balanced edition, and yet problems have generally been solved as we've gone along. Like, we're not getting bummed by knights anymore, for example. But I think we need to get rid of this idea of 10th is the most balanced edition and really say 10th has been the most firefighting edition, where GW has put out the most fires. 10th is the edition of putting out fires. That's what it is. And that's okay. I really appreciate that. I really, really appreciate it. Like, and this is why people hate, I'm really annoyed they've been so lazy at the end of the edition. Yeah. But yeah, I think I think that's basically it. I don't think there's here's one. Why is it every time we get new Catan rules, GW gets the rules are horribly wrong? Didn't we have the multi-Catan meta earliest edition? Remember the past edition where Catan and Catan fiasco? You think they would have learned that lesson by now? So the problem, Catan spam is basically just Imperial Knights, but better. That, like, all Catan are doing is the same thing that Knights did, but just better. Like, it's just, oh, do you have enough to kill a Katana turn? No, go back to the board. That's all. And I've maintained this for a long time. And it will never, ever happen because it's a decision that is made solely for gameplay purposes and not for financial purposes. But Games Workshop really needs to basically squat pure Knight armies, Chaos and Imperial. And they basically need to squat Custodes. And then they need to come in and put some hard caps. The rule of 3 or the rule of 6 isn't enough. Like, it needs to be, you can take like 1. This is a unit which is 0 to 1. Like, that's what needs to take place here. Like, the issue is just that, and that in many ways will solve some symptoms. It won't solve entire problems, but it will solve some symptoms. At least that's what I think anyway. But yeah, long story short, I agree with a lot of what this guy's saying in his post. I agree with a lot of what is being said in this post. But for me, the beef I have with this post is that it sees the surface level problem, and it starts to kind of get to grip. It starts to kind of hint at the deeper problems, but it for me, it kind of misses the woods for the trees. Because if it wasn't Katana, it'd be something else. If it wasn't them, it'd be something else. If it wasn't them, it'd be something else. And it would be the same. It would be the same kind of problems, just coming from different sources. And the only way you fix this is with radical game design changes. Some of that involving going back to older systems like weapon skill versus weapon skill, initiative, and stuff like that. Some of that introducing entirely new things. Like I've mentioned, you don't just want to be able to allow it. You need to have things that you've got weapon skill versus weapon skill. You need to have things like ballistic skill versus like evasion. Something like that. Ballistic skill versus ballistic defense, whatever it might be. Which basically, I like to say you have ballistic skill versus initiative. Represent, if someone something can be harder to hit but well armored. Well, that's just not really represented in shooting. It's just, Harlequins having a 4 pin run that represents they dodge the shot 50% of the time. Well, no. Doesn't really do a good job of conveying the difference. You need to have ballistic skill versus, not ballistic skill versus evasion, ballistic skill versus initiative, whatever it might be, to represent some units are harder to hit and some units are easier to hit but tougher. Like a Catan, one of the things you could have is Katana like what a great way to differentiate between like a Deceiver and a Nightbringer, or a Deceiver and Transcendent Catan. Like, what if the Deceiver just had like only like a 5 up invulnerable save, but had a higher initiative, which meant it was harder for you to hit him? Like, so let's say you've got like a Space Marine trying to shoot the Deceiver would only hit him on 5s because his initiative would be like, let's say like Space Marine ballistic skill would be like 4, Deceiver initiative would be like 5. You check your little, you just very quick, you just know if it's higher, it's like -1 to hit, or you have a little chart like back in Old World, which Old World proves that people can read charts. So I don't know why people ever said they couldn't. Bunch of bullshit that people just repeated online. But the Nightbringer, or maybe the Nightbringer could be kind of harder to hit as well because he's like really like dark and like mysterious and all that kind of stuff. But like a Transcendent Catan, that's all like glowy, sparkly. That thing could be like initiative like 3. Marines are like, I can fucking see it. Do you know what I mean? The example I like to use is like Orc Boys versus Eldar. An Orc Boy should be like initiative 2, which means basically everyone's hitting him on 3s. But he's toughness 5, which means lasguns should wound him on 6s. Not 5s, 6s. I chose my words on purpose that way. But he's easier to hit. So it's easier to hit, but harder to wound. But Eldar, it's like a Guardsman might only hit an Eldar on like a 6 with a lasgun. But if he hits, he's wounding on like a 4, maybe even higher than that. But that's when like, but how do the Guardsmen deal with these? Well, that's why you would have a reason to bring things like flamethrowers, because flamethrowers would be like, they automatically hit, or they get a bonus to hit, so that it's, they basically, the Eldar might dodge out of the way of a few flames, but typically the flames are really going to be hard to dodge around. Whereas an Orc wouldn't even try and dodge the flames, he's just going to like run through them. Yeah. That's like my opinion. But what do you guys think? Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and Patreons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Redfield, 32, Jurgens, Miasma, Try Again, Bragg, RJ, Scorpion, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Nicholas Walsh, John Stubbs, Guardian, Varney, Sword, Fish Trombone, Picklock the Forged. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.